Today we're going to sew an insulated casserole carrier. Because you know what? It's party season. And why not bring your favorite or everybody's favorite dish for your next event in this fancy little carrier that you made. This casserole carrier is inspired from a pattern I found at Sew4Home. This is the wrap and go quilted casserole carrier pattern. And I say I'm inspired by it because, as always, I changed a few little things compared to the original pattern. For example, I did not quilt the fabric or added those extra little details that she adds, like the hook for the oven mitts or other little details. I did add the pocket for the spatula or spoon. I did not use Insulated on this carrier. I've used Insulated before, and in fact, I made another one, and this one has Insulated inside, and it has the lining, the exterior, and in the center, it has Insulated. For the one that we're going to make today, I decided to use this quilted iron and board fabric, which is also insulated. It holds the heat, but I thought it looked so cute and I have never used this before, so I decided, why not? Let me go ahead and use this instead. As you can see, I used binding all along the edges of the carrier that we're going to make today. That is an optional method. You can also just take your exterior, your lining, your Insulated, join them right sides together, stitch it, turn it right side out, and then top stitch it for the edges, and that's it. So I don't consider myself a binding expert, okay? I usually bind things when it's a small purse or I have to quilt a small piece of fabric for a bag. So because I'm not an expert at binding, I have included 2 of my favorite videos on how to make the best binding. These are 2 ladies that I follow, so go ahead and check those videos out if you have questions about binding. But I decided to, do the binding, and so I'll share those with you. My companion. This is my sewing helper. Hi, Dino. I'm going to use my main fabric, my exterior, my lining and batting or Insulated is this quilted iron board fabric. And then as an accent for the binding, this is completely optional, I'm going to use this green fabric. If you're not using the binding, you can just use these 2. Or you can use this, and Insulated, or whatever combination you have. For the thread, make sure you have thread for each one of your pieces. So for the gray, for the green, and for this little kind of peachy, light peach color. That's important because if you have to, move things around, you want to make sure you have thread for all your material. Marking pens, depending on what you're marking, and the color so that you can see it. I definitely use the chalk for the outside. That way it's easy to brush off and remove the markings. So that's going to be important. Hoops and loops or Velcro, and I used this color, but I decided to use this green so that it matches with my project. To cut the fabric, I use my sewing cutting scissors, or I use this electrical scissors. They're amazing and they have helped me so much. And I also use my rotary cutter. The main rulers that I used were my 6.5 by 24, the 12.5 by 12.5, the square, and the 3 by 18. I also used the 1 by 12. These two were, I used them a lot when I was cutting the fabric, and then these two I used for measuring the Velcro placement, etc. During the construction of the carrier, I used the basting adhesive to join the two pieces of fabric together when I was before adding the binding. Very, very helpful. I really like this stuff. And double-sided tape, super, super useful, especially when you're applying your Velcro. Also, during the sewing process, if you need an owl, you can definitely, very helpful, and a pair of snipping scissors to snip all the extra thread, etc. This is completely optional, but when I make my straps, I use masking tape or painter's tape to mark, or you can use washi tape to mark one side of my strap, so that way if they get twisted, I know which side is the right side or the wrong side, whichever side I pick to put the tape. And you will see that in the instructions, and I have a video down also on how to make fabric straps, and I use that tip in there a lot. For this project, I used my Yuki TL210Q. You can definitely use a domestic machine for this project. It will definitely work as well. Let's start with cutting our fabric, of course. And we're going to use the measurements provided to us by the pattern designer. Of course, I have all that information down in the description of this video. But I cut my quilted ironing board fabric as well as my cotton fabric here for the exterior in the shape that is recommended by the pattern designer. So I make sure I follow these measurements. After I do that, I will join the exterior and the lining. If you're not doing the binding, you will join right sides together and stitch all around it, leave an opening and turn it inside out. If you're doing the binding, which is what I'm doing, you will join them wrong sides together, the two pieces of fabric, and you're going to pin it all around it. I use basting adhesive to make my fabric flat against each other, and it kind of sticks the fabric a little bit, so it's easier to get it under the sewing machine when I'm basting the two pieces of fabric together. For the basting, I'm really basting it at a 1/4 inch seam allowance using a 4mm stitch length, and I'm going to go around all the sides of the carrier, joining both the lining and the exterior fabric. Because I used the basting adhesive, it makes this process a lot easier. I like to test my measurements to make sure everything looks good before I trim off any of the seam allowance for my carrier. As you can see, I have some overlap on one side, so that gives me enough room to trim off any excess fabric if I have to. And on this side, I have a lot more overlap, so I have more room to work. Now I'm just going to trim off any excess fabric so that it's even, so the exterior and the lining match. In this case, I have a lot of extra exterior fabric that is uneven, so I'm going to use my ruler and my rotary cutter just to even it out. And on this other side as well, as you can see, it's not very even, so I'll go ahead and trim it off, and I feel confident that I can do that because I have enough material. Now let's add the bias binding. Now we're going to add the binding. Again, this is an optional step, but this is how I decided to do it. You're going to leave a good amount, about, I don't know, 8 inches of binding left over. And I'm going to start with one side here, one of the short sides. And I'm going to measure all the way to a 1/4 inch from the edge. In this method, we are going to take the stitching line and you're going to pivot the stitching line. Once you get to the 1/4 inch measurement, you're going to pivot it at a 45-degree angle. So for example, here I'm stitching it a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And as you can see, I'm getting to the edge, the 1/4 inch, right at the edge, and I'm going to pivot my material at a 45-degree angle, and I'm going to stitch it and back stitch to secure the stitching, and then I'm going to cut the thread and remove my material from the machine. Now, as you can see here, you see the stitching at a 45-degree angle. Now you're going to take your binding and you're going to push it away from your material, from your project, and then fold it again, aligning it along the edge. And you see you're going to form that square shape there. You're going to start stitching along the edge at a 1/4 inch seam allowance from the very beginning. This is one way to make the corner bindings. Now I'm going to show you the other way to do it. Consider liking this video and subscribing to this channel if you have learned something today. This method, you're going to continue to align your binding to the edge of your carrier, but when you get to the end, you're going to mark a 1/4 inch from the edge, and that's where you're going to stop stitching, right there. So you're going to take it to your sewing machine. You're going to start stitching all the way from the very top at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And when you get to the point where you have your 1/4 inch marking right at the very end of the stitching, you're going to stop at a 1/4 inch. And you're going to back stitch to secure the stitching and cut the thread. And you see the difference right here, a 1/4 inch. Now that you're here, you're going to take your binding and you're going to fold it at a 45-degree angle away from the carrier, and then you're going to fold it towards the carrier, aligning it along the edge. Of course, use as many clips as you need to during this process. And when you get to this corner here, you're just going to treat it as a straight line. You're just going to continue aligning the binding to the edge. You're not going to fold it or do anything like that. You're just going to continue. Make sure you add pins here to keep the binding from moving. And that's it. You're going to get to the end, and as you can see, it's kind of like a straight line almost. And when you get to the other side of the carrier, you're going to do the same thing. You're going to mark a 1/4 inch from the edge, or right before you finish adding the binding. You're going to take it to the sewing machine. You're going to stitch it all the way from the top, just like you've done before. And you're just going to stitch it at a straight line, a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Take your time here to make sure the binding is aligned to the edge of your carrier, and move your fabric around if you need to. It will look a little bit folded, but don't worry. Remember to backstitch when you get to the 1/4 inch mark. Now that you've done all your sides, we're going to close off the binding. I have a video down in the description that shows you exactly how to do it. It's the best method I have found. But the way they do it is they measure the width of the binding, and that's the measurement that they use to determine the overlap of one side of the binding and the other side of the binding. So as you can see, this is one overlapping the other. And then you open one side of the binding with the right side, wrong side facing you, and then you're gonna fold one edge at a 45-degree angle, or one end at a 45-degree angle. And then you're going to take the other one, the right side facing each other, and you're going to align it along that 45-degree marking. And it's going to create like this little mountain. Make sure you pin it in place on both sides, so on the right and on the left, so that it can stay together. And now I am going to pin it along the bottom, so that way I know where I'm going to stitch. So I'm going to stitch along the bottom line here to join both triangles. So you see where I'm placing the pins? That's where I'm going to stitch. Along the bottom, not along the sides. Okay, so now that it's completed, what I'll do is that I see the stitching right there. It's all together. I am going to cut it at about a 1/4 inch from the stitch line, so to remove the excess fabric. Open your seam. And now the binding is folding flat, and it looks like a bias seam, and it looks perfect and it fits perfectly. So go ahead and stitch the binding to the carrier along that opening. After that's done, now we're going to fold the binding over to cover the raw edges and to cover the stitch line. Use as many pins as you need in this case during this step. And if you need to trim any of the bulkiness around the corners, trim any loose threads, this is the time to do it. Pull your binding over, make sure it's tight. And as you can see, you can just fold one side. Like this section right here is kind of bulky, so I'm going to trim off this right here to help the fabric, okay? So you fold one side. What I do is that I put pins on one side to help the fabric kind of stay in place. and then I fold the other side over it and it turns into that beautiful corner. This part is going to require a lot of clips or pins, so make sure you have them handy and go ahead and do the entire carrier. Now when you get to this corner here that is not a folded corner, you're just going to move the fabric around and make sure that it covers the stitch line and make sure that it covers everything. And just, you know, don't worry if it looks a little wrinkled, it's okay. Just keep going along all the sides of your carrier. Now we're taking it to the sewing machine. You're going to stitch it. Ideally at a 1/4 inch seam allowance, I stitch it with the right size facing me, so that way I know for sure I'm gonna catch the stitch line right here. And of course I wanna make sure that it also catches the stitches on the back of the carrier. So that way the stitching looks like it's on the binding. So just work with your material the best way that you can and take your time during this process. And once you get to the corner here, you're going to stitch, keep your needle down, lift your presser foot, pivot your fabric, and keep on stitching. Making sure that you're catching your binding in the front and in the back of the carrier. This part, it's, you know, bended, so it's almost like a curve, so you're gonna treat it as a curve. Just take it slow, don't worry, it's going to work out. It's all completed. You can look at your binding. This binding was a little wide for my taste. Maybe next time I'll make it a little bit narrower. Now let's make the utensil pocket. For that, you're going to take the piece that is 8 by 6 and you're going to fold it in half lengthwise. So it will be 8 by 3. And mark the center with your fingers or any tools that you may have. Now, with the wrong side facing you, you're going to take your fusible interfacing. It's a little piece and you're going to place it right in the center where you mark the crease and you're going to fuse it. Now that it's done, you're going to fold it again, right sides together, and it's going to be 8 inches long by 3 inches wide. And you're going to join the sides. You're going to join the 3 inch sides and the 8 inch sides. You're going to leave an opening because you're going to stitch this from the 2 markings. So I left about 2 inches in the center, and you're going to stitch from that marking. You're going to go to the corner and then turn and finish there, and you're going to do the same on the other side. You can use a 1/4 inch seam allowance, 3mm stitch length for that. Now fold your seam, and that folding of the seam will really make it easy for you when you're turning your piece right side out. that fabric will tucked in inside. Trim the edges and the corners, and now turn it inside out. I have this little tool that I have that helps me when I'm turning pieces so that I can push the corners out and it will look nice and square. Now I'm going to top stitch it around all 4 sides. Now I used a little piece of the leftover binding that I had here and folded the raw edges down the center so that it looks nice and finished. And I'm just going to apply a little piece of binding to one side of my pocket, and that will be my top, my open side of the pocket. So pick whatever side you like and attach your little piece of binding. And this is optional, of course. So I'm going to stitch it at a 1/4 inch seam allowance, fold it over and stitch it again, and that will give my pocket that a little bit of a finished look that will match with the rest of my carrier. And here's the finished look. Now I am going to place the pocket on the carrier. So I'm going to place it on the, not the exterior flaps, but the inside flaps. So the ones that are a little bit longer and narrower. And just choose a placement. And you're going to place it about 3 inches in from the side and a couple of inches up from the bottom of the carrier. And you're going to stitch your pocket at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, 3mm stitch length on all 3 sides, except for the side where the binding is. So I'm going to take my baking dish and I'm going to place it inside my carrier to make sure that everything fits right and to make sure that I place the Velcro in the right place. So I've made the pocket on the longer flap. So here it is, and this is the smaller flap, and as you can see here, I don't know if you can see, but it's pretty tight. I don't have a lot of overlapping fabric, maybe an inch, so I'm having to put the Velcro right here along the edge of these flaps, so that way it's, you know, right there, so that it can close. And I think it's because my dish has these long handles, and so it's taking up a little bit of extra room. I'm not sure, but that's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to put the scratchy side of the Velcro on the top one here, where I have my pocket, and the soft side on the bottom one. For the other side of the carrier, it doesn't really matter. You can choose whichever way, top and bottom, it doesn't matter. There is plenty of room on this one, so that's good. What I'm going to do is place the Velcro along the sides here and here, and the same here and here. And the reason why I'm going to do that, it's because, for one, I want to make sure I don't, you know, have the exact measurement. So I'm using the border of the binding as measurements, and of course I'm going to measure it, but you know, just to make sure. But if I put it along the side here, you can almost adjust it to your dish. You can make it tighter, you can make it bigger, you know, it depending on what you have here. So I am going to do that this way. Hopefully that works. Okay, so this is the Velcro I'm going to use. So for this side, so it depends. If I put the top one, I think I'm gonna do the soft side here on the bottom and the scratchy one on the top. So here's the soft side or the loops. No, yeah, these are the loops. And truly all I need is maybe 3 inches. Yes, 3 inches. So I'm going to put it right on the edge, maybe. Let me measure this. Hold on. Let me get the ruler. So I'm just going to cut 3 inches and 3 inches. Okay. Okay, so 1/2 inch in from the edge and 1/2 inch down from that top edge, 3 inches. So place your Velcro right there. So this is temporary. Remember, we're going to mark it on both sides, and I'm going to use double-sided tape to keep it in place so when I take it to the sewing machine, it doesn't move. Okay, so for this side, we are going to mark 3 inches, 1/2 inch in from the edge and 1/2 inch down from the top, 3 inches and 3 inches, okay? So it goes like this and like that. Now to place the other side of the Velcro, you're going to do the same measurements, right? 1/2 inch down from the top and 1/2 inch over from the side. And then you're going to mark 1/2 inch down here. And then you're gonna count 3. 1, 2, 3. And that is your other line, okay? That's one line. And then the other one, you're going to do the same. Okay, so we're going to place the left side here. We have our light markings. This is just as a guide, as a reference. What's really going to make it work is when you place it here and you kind of stick it to the other side. So let's see if this tape wants to work. I'm just gonna use 2 pieces of tape. Usually the double-sided tape works, but for some reason this one is not wanting to work today. Another thing I can probably do is get some glue stick. Sometimes that works if your tape is giving you a hard time, like this one. But I don't have a glue stick with me here. I have to look. Okay. So lightly press your other side. Make sure that it's straight And just make sure that it's not like over the binding, okay? Just align it like that. See how it's aligned there a little bit. And then you have to pick up the hoop side, and you have to lift it up, okay? And it's just going to stay there, okay? And you're gonna help it. You're gonna just pick up the hoop side right there, making sure that it's attached to the fabric as much as possible. It's a little complicated, but, and there it is. It's in place, okay? So now I'm going to take it to the sewing machine and I'm going to stitch it just like I did the other ones. Now we're going to fold. We're going to add the Velcro to the top side of the carrier. And this is the side that it's a little tight. It doesn't have a lot of overlap material. So I am going to place the Velcro right here at the very edge of my binding. And I actually want to have the side with the pocket for my tool to overlap the bottom. So for that, I am going to have the scratchy here on the top, the scratchy side of the hoops and loops on the top, and the soft side on the bottom. Okay, 19.5 inches. Make sure that is centered. It's about a 1/4 inch off on each side, but right over the binding. And again, I'm just going to use double-sided tape to place it where it goes. And I'm just gonna put the tape here on the carrier. Okay. And for the bottom, it's the same thing. So now I'm going to take the soft side of the hoops and loops. And again, 19.5 inches. Okay. And same thing, I'm just going to place it right there. And it will fit like that. See? Just be careful now when you take it out, because it's not stitched yet. Just have to get it out, you know, making sure that the Velcro still, or the hoops and loops is still in place. I have this light peach color on, that's the main color on this fabric, and my Velcro is green. I'm going to, my top thread is going to be green. My bobbin thread is like this peach color. When I stitch this one, my top thread still going to be green, but my bobbin thread is going to be gray. So I'm gonna swap the bobbin when I stitch this one, okay? So let's take it to the sewing machine and get this done. Now let's test it. We put the dish in there. Here's my inner part that is not, it's pretty tight, but it closes. I will put my spoon here, and here is the top. Right there. Nice. Now let's make the handles. For the strap, the pattern says to use webbing, and most patterns say webbing, but I'm going to make the straps out of fabric. The length of the webbing is 64 inches. And it's a loop. So you have to make a loop, which means that you have to sew all the ends together. So 64 inches, and because of the seam allowance, I'm gonna use a 1/2 inch seam allowance. That is 65 inches long. And I already joined one side here, and I'm getting ready to join the other side. Yeah, I'm going to join it on the other end, right sides together at 1/2 inch seam allowance. Now that you have the loop, you're going to take your wrong side facing you, and you're going to fold them in half, wrong sides together, and you're going to go all along the loop and press it to mark the crease. So here's my loop all folded in half. And I have a video on how to make straps out of fabric that you can look here. I'm going to link it in this right here in this video. But this is the folding method for your strap. So the width of this is 4 inches. So now fold it in half, wrong sides together. So this is the right side, and as you can see, I have a full loop. Now I'm going to open it, and now I'm going to bring the raw edges to the center crease on both sides and fold it again. And clip it or pin it in place. And you're going to go around the entire loop. You need to take a piece of tape and find your exterior and interior right or wrong side of your strap, because it's the same color and you don't want it to get twisted. You can say, this is my front. Okay, this is the front. Making sure it's not twisted. So I know that when I'm stitching it, I need to, the front part or the exterior will be the one with the tape. And that's easier because that way I can just remove it as I'm stitching it. Okay, so you're going to find that seam right here, okay? Right there. And you're going to measure 7 inches from the seam that way and 7 inches that way. And I'm going to use my chalk. So here's 7. So from here to here, okay, I have 7 inches. So I'm just gonna remove these for now, so I have room to work. That's 7. Okay, and same here, 7 from here to there. I'm gonna put the clips back. I'm going to do the same on the other side. Again, making sure nothing is twisted. Looks good. Okay. So 7. From here to here. And 7 from here to here. Let me take this tape. Now we are going to stitch the strap beginning at the 7 mark all the way around, and you're going to, so here's my 2 7s, okay? Here's my 2 markings. You're going to stitch, you're gonna end there, and then you're going to go across, and you're gonna go around and do it here and go across, okay? And you're going to do the same on this side. Okay, like that. So you're going to start, always start at the opening side. So we're gonna start here, go around, go across, go on the outer, get there and across and back stitch. And do the same on this side. You have the long skinny side, that is the side that has the pocket, okay? And then you have a wider side, which and shorter, which is the side that's going to go on top of your carrier. Here's where we're going to put the straps. The straps are gonna go here. So what we're going to do is that we're going to fold this in half like this. Exterior side out. Okay, so it's folded in half, and you have your pocket for your tool, your spatula or whatever there, right? You're going to take your ruler, you're going to measure 3 inches right here on the edge. You're going to measure 3 inches in, and you're going to mark all the way to the end, to the bottom here, okay? All the way to the center, making sure it is straight, okay? So that is where you're going to place your strap. So I'm using the chalk because that way I can just brush it off and it will come off easily. I'll do the same here. So you're going to take your strap that you just made, and you find your seam. You're going to find the seam where you joined the 2 pieces of fabric, and that seam is going to go right there in the center. This is like the middle of the carrier. And you're going to place your seam right there. Okay? Go ahead and for now. And the rest of my strap is going to align along the 3-inch mark. Keep this in place. You can also pin it in place. I'm just gonna place another pin here. Sorry, I don't know where my pins are. Okay. And I'm going to do the same with this other side here. Okay, here's my 3-inch mark. Let me get a little piece of double-sided tape. Adjust as necessary, as long as it's straight and flat. That's what you want. So you're going to start on the open side. You're going to stitch, make a square, stitch, and make a square. And then you're going to do the same on the other side. And here's how it looks. These are the stitch lines for the handle. And as you can see, it's down the center, and I stitched the little square with a cross to give it extra support for the handle. This is how it looks, the final piece. And with the casserole inside, look at how nice and even is on the bottom to give it support to your container and your food. You definitely want it to have support. Here's the spoon or spatula, anything that you're going to use to scoop up your food. It fits perfectly in the little pocket. The Velcro makes it easy to open and close. So I am very, very happy with the end result for this casserole carrier. I made a pad for the handle, and you can check out my next video to show you how I made this nice little handle to make it more comfortable to carry your casserole.